Hey YouTube, Emo Reviews here, bringing back to you another One Piece chapter review. This week we'll be reviewing One Piece chapter 1032, entitled Oden's Beloved Blade. So this chapter starts off with Marco carrying Izo by the shoulder. Here we have Marco wondering why Izo wants him to carry him given the condition that he's in. But we see that Izo is feeling a bit uneasy about the reports of the giant fire blob monster that's passing through the castle. We even have a shot where we see Big Mom, who should still be fighting Kid and Law. And just looking at that panel, you can see that Big Mom has taken quite the amount of damage from their fight so far. Which just gives me the feeling that Big Mom will definitely be defeated during this arc. And a lot of people have been wondering and saying that Big Mom won't be defeated until Elbaf. But by the way things are looking, I think Kid and Law will be defeating her in this arc. But now that doesn't mean that she won't be present during Elbaf, but definitely I think she's going down during this arc. And it only makes sense that she is defeated by the end of this arc, because by the end of this arc, Luffy would have defeated a Yonko, and we know Kid and Law is Luffy's rivals. So it only makes sense that they have an equal feat to be even considered in that discussion of being Luffy's rival. And taking down Big Mom makes perfect sense for their rivalry, whereas the world government and everyone around them will be looking at them as equals. We also have a tidbit with Yamato and Fuga, and it seems like Fuga is Yamato's friend, which is cool. And since Yamato has been in Wano all her life, it only makes sense that some people within Kaido's crew, in this case one of the numbers, is a friend. So while Fuga and Yamato are running, and Yamato is sort of telling Fuga that she's busy, she has somewhere to go, we see Robin and Brook are falling from the sky, and they land right in Fuga's hair, and Fuga's hair acts as a cushion for them. And we also see behind them, they're being pursued by CP0. And as the CP0 members are landing, they somehow get caught in the giant fire blob that catches up to them and sorts of engulfs them in flames. Any normal person would, of course, be presumed dead, but they get up like it's nothing. Even one of the CP0 members, his hat, if you look at him, his hat even seems unaffected by the flames. Which brings us to one of the more funnier parts of the chapter. As the CP0 members are sort of coming out of the flames, we see Apu start snapping pictures of the CP0 members. And he says that he would sell the shots to Good News Morgans. Which I found to be so funny here, because here we have a big war that's going on. Kaido's a dragon fighting on top of the roof against Luffy. There's a giant blob monster that's burning everything and passing through walls. Big Mom is rampaging around Onigashima. All of these other battles are happening, and there's just chaos everywhere. And the best thing Apu finds to do is to pull out his camera and start snapping shots at CP0 members, which is so funny. And you would think that this camera would have been broken if he had a camera on him, because he was attacked by Kid earlier, and he was fighting in the main floor when Queen was turning everyone into those ice onis, but somehow the camera that's in his pocket is unaffected. Apu's just going click 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 click, just taking tons of pictures. but this is so funny. But obviously the CP0 members wouldn't want the news that the government is dealing with Kaido to get out, so one of them attacks Apu and sends him flying down, and Apu seems to be knocked out for the moment. And this agent even knows of Drake's affiliation with the Marines, which begs me to wonder, does he know that Drake is with Sword specifically, or does he just know that he is still with the Marines? Because if he in fact knows about Sword, then Sword isn't really that secretive of a faction as we would have thought it would be. But I will assume, though, that he just knows that Drake is working with the Marines, but not that he's a member of Sword specifically, or that he knows the name Sword at all. But that same agent that attacked Apu goes to attack Drake because he doesn't want Drake to leak any information either. But right before he attacks Drake, we see Apu gets up and attacks him. and sends him flying for a bit. But Apu gets up and he says that he is still alive because he used armaments haki. And although earlier when Apu got attacked, we saw blood and it seemed like Apu, a lot of damage was done. I guess the armaments haki blocked the damage to an extent, although we saw blood. But it seems though that now Apu and Drake are about to team up to fight both CP0 members, which is cool. I'm not so hyped for this, but I guess we'll see what comes out of it. Since Drake is part of the government and they are as well, so we'll see what happens there. Now we move on to the outside of the castle, where we see Zoro fighting King. And right off the bat, I mean, at the very beginning of this scene, we have Oda continuing to bend the rules of what dinosaurs are capable of. Because King sort of pulls the horn that's in the back of his head or on top of his head. I mean, King is really pulling this horn, and it's as if he's pulling a slingshot back or an arrow back to shoot. And we even see that his face gets a bit deformed because of how hard he's pulling his face back. And as he releases it, there's a named move which is called Imperial Deep Pride Stake. And it launches at Zoro like a laser beam, like at the speed of light. And Zoro couldn't even block it because of how fast that came crashing at him. But the funniest part is the fact that King says that prehistoric pteranodons hunted like that, which makes me like just sort of fictionally imagine. You could imagine some ancient rabbit or chicken is just walking around or taking a stroll, and suddenly a laser beam comes out of nowhere and crashes at them, and that's a pteranodon hunting for a meal. And so Zoro is just lost, and he asks King about the flame that's on his back. He asks if that's another feature of the pteranodon as well. To which King says no, and Zoro is understandably frustrated. Like, you're literally pulling your head back and shooting laser beams at me and calling that a natural feature of a pteranodon, but the flames on your back isn't. You know, and so Zoro is so frustrated and then he attempts to knock him out of the sky by using Black Robe Dragon Twister, and creates a massive twister. But we see that King simply blocks all of those slashes from the twister with his wings, and he even breaks out of it. And then he reverts back to his normal form and chooses to fight with his sword. It seems that he, as he said, he enjoys a good duel as well, and he is seemingly giving Zoro a chance by going back to his normal form, but because it seems that there's nothing Zoro could have done while he was flying. And with his sword, though, he is seamlessly overpowering Zoro with his sword, sending Zoro flying with just clashing of their blades. And we know Zoro is very strong, and King is just sending Zoro flying with ease. And now I know the One Piece community as a whole has been trash talking King a bit, right? Because he hasn't done as much compared to other first Yonko commanders, right? But King is making quite the strong statement for himself right now. And I know some people will say that Zoro has been fighting for most of this battle so far, while King hasn't fought much. But Zoro did take that medicine from the Minks that should have at least restored him back to 100%. And let's also not forget too that King did fight Marco. I know it's King and Queen fighting Marco, but from what we saw, Marco was really handing it to King and Queen. So King took some damage from another Yonko commander level fighter. So I feel like both Zoro and King are equal health-wise right now. And we see that King is just toying with him at this point. Which brings me to another question pertaining to Sanji versus Queen. Like, we see how Zoro is struggling with King. Obviously, King is a first commander. So understandably, so Zoro should be struggling. But Sanji doesn't seem to be having that hard of a time at all with Queen. Like, yeah, his hits against Queen aren't really damaging Queen at all, but Sanji's constantly sending Queen flying with his kicks. But we really haven't seen Queen press Sanji the way we see that King is pressing Zoro. But I'll leave that for the power scalers to discuss. And just a thought to mention it and bring that up. So now we're moving on to the conclusion of this chapter, which is after King sends Zoro flying. We start to hear the sound of a shamisen playing, and Enma sorts of react to that sound, to the sound of the shamisen. And we see that as it continues to play, Enma starts sucking the haki out of Zoro's arm like the first time he used it. And which is very interesting. We move on to another scene where we hear Orochi, or where we see Orochi rather, and who also hears the shamisen playing. And as he peeks through the room where the sound is coming from, we see that it's none other than his beloved Komurasaki. And, you know, Orochi's like, oh, if this is a dream, I don't want to wake up, because obviously he's in love with Komurasaki. And now this makes a lot of sense for Hiyori to have her moment with Orochi, because she has had to deal with him for over 20 years. 20 years, and some people were saying that, you know, one of the Scabbard members or Zoro, someone else is going to defeat Orochi. But it makes sense for the story that Hiyori at least has a hand in his defeat, because there is a lot of emotional buildup for this moment in particular, because like we mentioned, she had to deal with him for those 20 years when he took over Wano. And now she's actually getting to confront the man who took over Wano, and got her father killed in the process, not just as Komurasaki, but as Kozuki Hiyori. So this moment will be I'm sure it'll be very emotional, but everything will sort of come full circle. I'm sure she will let him know that she is Hiyori. And yeah, we'll see what happens with this part of the arc. But before we move on from this scene here and wrap up this video, there's a bit of a theory I want to throw out there as well, because although this is presumably Hiyori, I have a theory that this might not be Hiyori, but rather Lady Toki herself. We know that the two have similar hair colors and even look alike as well. So what if Toki dressed up as Komurasaki? And I'm only making this theory because why would Hiyori playing a shamisen affect Enma the way that it did? Caused Enma to start sucking the haki out of Zoro's arm. And we know that Lady Toki was with Oden, and so she has a lot of time being close to that sword. So it only makes sense that her playing the shamisen would affect the sword in that way, because the sword is familiar with her, she is familiar with the sword. I do not see it making sense being Hiyori just randomly playing a shamisen and Enma reacts that way. Who knows, that might be just what it is, but we'll have to wait for the chapters to come for answers. But please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and feel free to drop me a like, subscribe, and if you want regular content like this from my channel. Imu-sama, out.